My name is Carrie. I'm 32 years old. And this Thanksgiving, I'm not coming home for the turkey. I'm coming for my name. The message came at 11:14 a.m., dressed like peace but built like a trap. Dad wants you home for Thanksgiving. Everyone will be there. 6 p.m. It came from Mom's number, but not her voice. No greeting, no small talk, no apology for the last 5 years, just instructions. I read it 3 times. For one brief, stupid second, I almost believed it. Not in forgiveness, but in habit. That old, dangerous pull of family gravity. If I were the person they still tell themselves I am, weak, emotional, unable to let go, I would have deleted it. But I've learned not to delete what hurts. I placed the phone face down, breathed in for 4 counts, out for 4, like my therapist taught me, and reached for the small metal box on the top shelf of my closet. My real RSVP to Thanksgiving dinner was inside. The box smelled of cold iron and old paper. Inside, a flash drive the color of a blade, a handful of printed spreadsheets with red pen marks, my old handwriting, and a folded letter in a checkered envelope, stamp half peeled off. Mom's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, orderly, like she was forcing herself to be neat. You were always too honest for this family. When I first found it, I thought it was a compliment with a bruise. Now I know it was a warning. I spread everything across the bed. On the left, the numbers. On the right, the voices. The numbers. Accounts, transactions, missing zeros. The voices, scanned checks, clipped transcripts, fragments of calls, men with calm tones making promises they never meant to keep. The pages formed a timeline, neat as evidence. My phone buzzed again. You'll come, confirm? I typed 2 words. I'll be there. No smiley, no okay, no thanks. Those 3 words were all my plan required. Show up, speak, end it. By noon, the rain had started, thin, cold, the kind that erases color. I made coffee stronger than usual and opened a blank page in my notebook. 3 lines. 1. I will not apologize. 2. I will not let them rewrite the story. 3. I will leave on my own terms. Not a mantra, a safety rope. Because I know how easily they twist words, how easily they turn "we love you" into "we own you." Sometimes memory attacks like static. It hit me mid-sip. I was 27, the family firm's accountant, sitting in the office after hours. Dean, 23, charming, careless, leaned over my desk. You worry too much, he said. The numbers said otherwise. The next day, the accusations began. By nightfall, I was out. He stayed. No one followed me to the door. I rinsed that thought down the drain, finished the coffee, and focused on the now. The rain, the metal, the weight of the flash drive in my palm. By 4, the city had turned festive. People with pies and wine bottles and children in puffy coats. Brake lights blinking like red sequins on wet asphalt. Everyone rushing to their warmth. Except me. I wasn't rushing. I was rehearsing. Before leaving, I chose my armor, a dark blue dress, no jewelry, no makeup beyond the kind that erases tiredness. I tied my hair low, calm, deliberate. The flash drive went into my right pocket, close to my heartbeat. The letter in my bag. Mom's words came with me, but unseen. They'd already done their work. I left half an hour before sunset. The air was sharp, full of smoke and rain. My car started on the first try, like it understood what tonight meant. I ignored the GPS and took the old back roads, past the fields, past the white fences, where the world still looked the way it used to before everything broke. As the houses grew larger, cleaner, quieter, my pulse steadied. That's the strange thing about fear. When you stop running from it, it starts obeying you. I parked one street away. The house looked exactly the same. White siding, manicured porch, strings of polite fairy lights. The sign on the porch read, "Grateful, blessed, thankful." My mother's handwriting, of course. The door was unlocked, it always was. "We don't lock doors in this neighborhood," she used to say. Good people don't have to. The smell hit first. Butter, pine polish, control. Music played somewhere, soft jazz, the kind that fills silences without risking emotion. Look who it is, Mom said when I stepped in. She wore pearls, an apron, and that fragile calm she's mastered. The one that says, I'm pretending this is normal, and so will you. You look well, she said. So do you, I lied. She looked brittle. Her eyes flitted behind me, searching for something she couldn't name. Dad came in wiping his hands on a towel, the same gray at his temples, the same tired kindness in his face. There she is, he said. Hugged me briefly, carefully. The hug of a man testing whether glass can hold, and then Dean's voice from the dining room. Curry! Drawn out like a game show host's intro. He appeared in the doorway. Crisp shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled to show the watch, that permanent half-smile people mistake for confidence. He hugged me too, leaning close enough for me to smell the expensive wine on his breath. We're doing this, he whispered. Let's keep it civil, yeah? I stepped back. Sure. The living room looked like a magazine spread, the perfect Thanksgiving edition. Every chair symmetrical, candles already lit, family portraits on the wall. My face wasn't in any of them. Maybe it never had been. Maybe they just made sure it wouldn't be again. Drink? Dean offered, already pouring. I took the glass but didn't drink. We circled through the small talk. Mom's new garden, Dad's back pain, Dean's business success. Words that filled the air like styrofoam. Lightweight, unbreakable, impossible to recycle. Every now and then, Dean looked at me the way a man studies a crack in a mirror, not yet wide enough to admit his reflection is breaking. After a few minutes, I excused myself and walked to the edge of the living room, near the piano. The family portraits watched me with their permanent smiles. My fingers brushed the flash drive in my pocket. Cool, heavy, certain. Mom followed me holding a basket of rolls. She touched my elbow, carefully, like touching might trigger something. You must be tired, she said. Such a long drive. And we're all so happy you're here. Are you? I asked. Not cruelly, just honestly. She blinked. Of course, it's Thanksgiving. That line was supposed to fix everything. The holiday is amnesty. But some wars don't pause for parades. Dad appeared again, hovering between us like a referee. Dinner's ready, he said, and his voice cracked just enough to betray the effort it took. I didn't move. Before we sit down, I said, there's something I'd like to do. Mom froze, rolls still in her hands. Carrie, she whispered. Not now. Now, I said quietly. Exactly now. Dean leaned against the doorway, wineglass in hand, smile too bright. What's this, a toast? Something like that. I took the flash drive out of my pocket. The chandelier light slid across its silver edge. This, I said, is my contribution to our family tradition. Every year we say what we're thankful for. This year, I'm thankful the truth made it to dinner, same as me. Mom's breath caught. Dad went still. Dean's smile twitched, just a fraction, enough for me to see it wasn't glued on, it was nailed. Carrie, he said slowly, soothing, professional. Let's keep things honest, I cut in. You remember the difference. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The house hummed with heat and rain on the roof. I could feel the storm outside pressing against the windows. I looked at each of them. The mother who mastered denial, the father who mistook silence for peace, the brother who weaponized charm. My blood, my past, my evidence. I wasn't shaking. Not anymore. My voice was calm, almost kind. We'll sit, I said. You'll say what you're thankful for. Then I'll say mine. And when I'm done, I'll play this. I raised the flash drive slightly. And I'll leave. Mom's lip trembled. Dad opened his mouth, closed it. Dean nodded like a man agreeing to the terms of a game he still thinks he can win. I slipped the flash drive back into my pocket. The metal pressed against my palm and my pulse. Steady, matched it beat for beat. I glanced toward the dining room. The table gleamed, candles waiting, the same table where I'd once learned what betrayal tastes like: dry wine, sweet potatoes, and fear. Now it was waiting for something else: the truth. I took a breath, low and slow, and walked toward the doorway. "My name is Carrie," I whispered under my breath. "I'm 32, and this is my house, even if my picture isn't on the wall." I stepped into the light of the dining room, and the house, for the first time in years, seemed to breathe with me. 5 years ago, I believed in numbers the way some people believe in God. Numbers were clean, numbers didn't lie, it was people who bent them. Our family company, Foster Realty, wasn't big enough to make the news, but it was respected, the kind of business that sponsored local baseball teams and gave scholarships in Dad's name. "We help people find their homes," he used to say. It sounded noble, and maybe it had been once. Before we started building our house on sand, I worked there straight out of college. Bookkeeping at first, then accounting. Spreadsheets were my language, the neat columns of logic against the chaos of family dinners. Dean, 4 years younger, was the company's face. The salesman, the talker, the charmer. He could sell an abandoned warehouse to a priest and make him think it was a cathedral. Dad ran the deals. Mom ran the image. I ran the math. That winter was brutal. Late payments, falling property values, clients ghosting us. I remember the flicker of the office fluorescent light, the stale coffee smell, the sound of the space heater kicking on and off. I stayed late as usual, trying to make the numbers align. They didn't. At first it was small. A missing check here, a duplicate vendor payment there. Then one evening, buried in a folder labeled Marketing Expenses, I found a wire transfer. $47,200 to a company I didn't recognize. D&L Consulting. The signature was Dad's. Except it wasn't. His handwriting was heavier, more deliberate. This one looked too smooth, too confident. I remember sitting there under that flickering light, comparing loops and slants, the rhythm of my heartbeat syncing with every difference I circled and read. D and L, Dean, and who. I printed everything: invoices, statements, even the metadata of the email that sent the file to the bank. And then I sat back and stared at it. Dean. I knew that name in the same way you know thunder is coming after lightning. The next morning, I waited in the parking lot until he arrived. He looked expensive. Pressed suit, phone glued to his hand, sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "Hey, sis," he said. "You're early. Everything okay?" "Who's D&L Consulting?" I asked. He blinked. For a moment, just one, his face was blank. Then he smiled that Dean smile, the one that made investors hand over their savings. "Small vendor. We outsource some marketing. Why?" I held up the printout. "They don't exist. The address is a mailbox. The invoices are fake. And this," I pointed to the transfer, "was signed with Dad's name, but it wasn't him." His jaw tensed, just slightly. "Carrie, come on. You're overthinking again." "No," I said quietly. "You're stealing." He laughed, that easy, rich laugh that used to make me proud of him. "You've been staring at spreadsheets too long. Take a weekend off." He started to walk past me, but I blocked the door. "Dean, I'm not joking." His smile faltered. "Neither am I. You want to accuse me of something? Do it properly, in front of Dad." "Fine." It should have been a victory, that word, fine, but it already tasted like defeat. We met that evening in the office conference room. Dad sat at the head of the table, still in his work jacket. Mom arrived late, in pearls, smelling of dinner she'd half burned in her panic. Dean was calm, even helpful, setting out glasses of water like a moderator at a panel. "Your sister thinks I'm robbing the company," he began, voice full of gentle humor. "Let's clear this up before it becomes one of her episodes." "Episodes?" I repeated. "You mean proof?" I slid the folder across the table. Dad flipped through the papers, slow, deliberate, like a man reading a language he used to speak but no longer trusted himself with. Mom's eyes moved back and forth between us, from her golden son to the daughter who'd always made things complicated. When Dad reached the last page, he exhaled, a sound like a door shutting. "Dean," he said softly, "what is this?" "A misunderstanding," Dean replied instantly. "Look at the header, D&L. That's for design and layout. A contractor in Denver. Carrie found a duplicate vendor file from when we merged systems last year. It's already fixed." I leaned forward. "That's a lie." I checked with the bank. "The account's in your name." Dean didn't even blink. "Then you're mistaken." "I'm not." Mom's voice sliced through mine. "Enough." Her fingers clutched her glass. "Carrie, sweetheart, you've been under stress. You work too much. You see patterns where there aren't any." "Mom, Your brother has done nothing wrong," she said, as if saying it could make it true. "We're lucky to have him. He's saved this company more than once." "He's draining it," I said louder now. "Look at the numbers." Dean stood. "This is ridiculous. Dad, tell her." Dad rubbed his temples. The silence stretched like wire. Finally, he said, "Carrie, maybe you should take a few days off. Get some rest." I felt the world tilt. "You believe him over me?" Mom touched his arm. "She's tired, Robert. Let's not make this worse." Dean's hand landed on my shoulder, a gesture that might have looked brotherly from the outside. "Go home, Kerr. Sleep it off. We'll sort it out Monday." I shrugged him off. "Don't touch me." His eyes hardened. "Then don't throw stones at family." I left the office shaking, from anger, not fear. Outside, snow had started to fall, quiet and soft, like nothing bad could happen under weather that beautiful. By Monday, my access to the accounting system was revoked. Dean told everyone it was for security reasons. By Wednesday, he'd moved into my office. By Friday, I was called into a meeting. Dad sat with the company's lawyer. Mom was there too, pretending to review paperwork. They said there had been concerns about my accuracy. They said I had leaked confidential data. They said maybe I was not well. Maybe. And just like that, the girl who balanced their books became the story they told about what happens when someone can't handle pressure. I walked out carrying a cardboard box filled with things that suddenly looked cheap. A framed photo of all of us at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a cactus from my desk, a mug that said, "Numbers don't lie." On the way out, Dean held the door for me. "No hard feelings," he said. I didn't answer. I spent the next month trying to clear my name. Banks, emails, calls. I tried to show Dad the full paper trail, the money trail, but he refused to meet. Dean explained everything, he said once over the phone. "Let it go." Let it go. That phrase was the family's favorite weapon. Then the firm announced a strategic restructuring. Dean became vice president. My name disappeared from the company website. Mom stopped answering my texts. When she finally did, she wrote, "We just need a little distance right now. Dean's under a lot of pressure. Please don't make this harder for him. For him." I remember reading that message over and over until the words blurred. It wasn't even anger that came next. Just a deep, dull exhaustion, the kind that fills your bones like sand. I stopped calling. A few months later, a letter arrived from the bank. A polite notice that my personal line of credit had been used to guarantee a business loan. I never signed such a document. But my name was there, in blue ink. Perfect imitation. The bank manager, an old family friend, looked at me over his glasses. "Your brother said you'd co-signed verbally. It's all sorted now. The company's doing fine." I walked out before I could scream. That night, I went to the office after hours. I still had an old key. No one thought to change the locks. The rooms were dark except for the server lights blinking like quiet heartbeats. I sat at my old desk and turned on the computer. I didn't plan to steal anything. I just wanted proof. Something real. In the finance drive, under a folder labeled Q4 Reports, I found the real records, the ones Dean hadn't meant anyone to see. Transfers, reimbursements, accounts in his name, routed through shell companies. He wasn't just skimming money, he was preparing to take over completely. I backed up everything onto a flash drive, The printer hummed quietly as it spat out page after page of their lies. Each sheet was a wound, but also a weapon. The front door opened. Dean's voice echoed down the hallway. I froze. He came in alone, coat collar up, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw the light from my office, he stopped talking. Well, look at you, he said softly. Couldn't stay away, huh? I needed the truth, I said. He walked closer, slowly, the smile gone now. What's the plan, Carrie? March in here and play whistleblower? Get me fired? Send Dad to jail? You think they'll thank you for that? You forged his name, I said. I saved his legacy, he snapped. You think those deals close themselves? You think your precious spreadsheets pay mortgages? You stole from us, I whispered. He leaned over the desk so close I could smell the cold air on his coat. I built us. You just count the bricks. I didn't move. Get out. No, he said. You get out. He snatched the folder from my hands. Pages scattered to the floor like snow. You're not going to ruin this. Not for me, not for them. I reached for the papers, but he was faster. He picked up the flash drive and held it between his fingers, eyes cold. You always did think evidence could save you. You never understood that truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. He dropped the drive into his pocket. Go home, Carrie. You're done here. I left because staying would have meant breaking something. Him, me, maybe both. Outside, the snow had turned to sleet. It stung when it hit my skin. 2 weeks later, Dad called me to the house. I thought maybe he'd finally seen what Dean had done. But when I arrived, the air was thick, heavy with silence. Mom was standing by the window, arms folded. Dean sat at the dining table, perfectly still. Dad had a folder in front of him. He didn't look angry, just tired. Your brother says you took sensitive files, he said. He has reason to believe you were planning to leak them. That's not true. He pushed a paper across the table. A printed email, forged in my name. It looked real. It even sounded like me. Dean had learned my phrasing too well. I didn't write this, I said. Mom spoke up, voice trembling. Carrie, please, we don't want this to go any further. Just admit you made a mistake. I didn't. Dean's voice was calm, soothing. Then prove it. I can't. You took... I stopped. He smiled. He knew. Dad stood. I think you should leave, he said. For a while. And that was it. No shouting. No drama. Just quiet execution. I walked out with nothing. No box this time. No evidence. Just a single letter Mom slipped into my coat pocket as I passed her. The one that began, you were always too honest for this family. Outside, the night was clear, sharp, unforgiving. I remember thinking, they erased me so easily. The next day, I was gone from everything, the payroll, the website, the family photo at the firm's reception desk. Dean had replaced my signature on the company's documents with his own. It looked neater, straighter, as if I'd never existed. And maybe that's what broke me the most. Not that they believed him, but that they preferred him. He was easy to love. I was just right. Truth doesn't make you family, it makes you inconvenient. I left town the next morning. No goodbye, no message. Just my car, the highway, and a promise I made to myself under the pale gray sky. One day, they'll sit at their perfect table again. And I'll be there too. Not to eat, to serve what's been cooking all along. They set the table like nothing had ever broken. White linen, polished forks, candles lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. Mom's handwriting on tiny cards marked each place. Mine said Carrie in her soft cursive, as if naming me again could rewrite the last 5 years. Dean poured wine with the confidence of a priest performing ritual. He'd chosen something expensive enough to sting the budget, cheap enough to look generous. Finally, he said. All of us together. I sat at the far end, the flash drive inside my pocket, pressing against my leg like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Every sound, the scrape of cutlery, the small nervous laugh from Mom felt too loud. Dad began the blessing. Lord, we give thanks for. Stop pretending, I thought. But I bowed my head anyway, out of habit. When we lifted our eyes, everyone smiled. I didn't. Dinner began with safe talk, weather, traffic, how the neighbor's son got into Yale. I waited. Patience had become my second skin. Halfway through the turkey, Mom said brightly, Carrie, you must tell us about your cafe work. So creative. Mostly math, I said. Counting change, keeping things balanced. Dean laughed too loudly. Always with the balance sheets. He didn't see the flicker in Dad's face, the same flinch I'd seen when he realized once that a foundation crack couldn't be painted over. Funny thing, I said, slicing a piece of meat. Balance. It has a way of finding you no matter how long you try to avoid it. Mom's fork paused midair. Dean poured himself more wine. I looked around the table. We used to do the Thanksgiving speeches, remember? What we're thankful for? Mom forced a smile. Of course, why don't you start? I'd love to. I stood. The room stilled. Candlelight flickered against the silver picture frame on the sideboard. The family photo from the old office opening. Dean in front, me half hidden in the back. I'm thankful, I began. For math. For the way numbers tell the truth, even when people don't. Dean rolled his eyes. Here we go, Mom whispered. Carrie. But I kept talking, voice low, steady. 5 years ago, I thought I made a mistake. I thought honesty was the problem. Turns out it was the solution. I just didn't have enough proof then. I reached into my pocket and laid the flash drive beside my wine glass. Metal on crystal. A small, sharp sound. This holds copies of every transfer, every signature, every lie you built that company on. Silence. Even the clock stopped meaning. Dad's knife slipped from his hand. Oh, what are you talking about? She's lost it, Dean said quickly. Dad, don't listen. I tapped the drive. Do you want to know who signed your name, Robert? His head jerked up. I never called him that before. Mom's voice cracked. Carrie, please, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time, I said. You wanted a perfect family dinner? Here's perfection. Truth served warm. I crossed to the TV by the cabinet and plugged the drive in. The screen blinked alive, blue light spilling over the table. First came the emails. The room filled with Dean's voice, recorded messages, smooth and confident. No worries, I'll move it through Dad's account. He'll never notice. Then the spreadsheets, columns of numbers, payments looping from the firm to D&L Consulting, back into Dean's private fund. Then copies of checks, the forged signature curling just wrong enough for anyone who knew Dad's hand. Dad stared at the screen like it was a mirror he'd avoided for years. Mom covered her mouth. Dean? He stood. This is out of context. She's twisting. Don't, I said. My voice was almost a whisper. Don't lie again, not here. He pointed at me. You hacked my files. That's illegal. You forged a loan in my name, I answered. That's criminal. For the first time, Dad's eyes left the screen and found Dean's. Tell me she's lying. Dean's mouth opened, closed. The charm drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. She's exaggerating. Dad, I was fixing things. You were drowning, I saved the company. You saved yourself, I said. And you used me to do it. I walked closer to him. He backed into his chair. You ruined my job, my reputation, my home. You erased me so you could shine brighter. Congratulations, Dean. You built your empire on the silence you forced out of me. Mom's tears came then, small, embarrassed sobs. Stop, she whispered. Please, both of you. I turned to her. You want it to stop? It stops when truth does. She shook her head as if shaking could undo it. Dad rose slowly. Dean, those numbers? I did what had to be done, Dean shouted. You think the company runs on good intentions? She never understood business. He grabbed the flash drive from the table, yanked it out of the TV. The screen went dark. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd throw it. Instead, he held it up like a trophy. You think this makes you right? He hissed. You think you win because you embarrassed us? I looked him in the eye. I don't win. You lose. That's balance. Dad stepped forward. Give it to me. Dean hesitated, then dropped the drive on the table. The metal clinked once and rolled toward my plate. No one moved. Then Dad sat down, hands covering his face. How much? He asked softly. Dean didn't answer. Mom's voice broke again. How could you do this to your father? I did it for him, Dean shouted, to keep everything from collapsing. You wanted a success story. Well, I gave you one. You gave us shame, Dad said, his voice barely audible. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dean looked at me wild-eyed. You happy now? No, I said. Not happy, free. He laughed, short, broken. You'll destroy us all just to be right. I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed play again. The next file was an audio memo, his call with the bank manager confirming my forged signature. Mom screamed. Dean lunged for the remote. I stepped between him and the table. Don't, I warned. He stopped, breathing hard. You can't undo this. I don't need to, I said. I just need you to see it. I turned the volume up. The banker's voice echoed through the room, calm, oblivious. Dean's laugh followed, smooth, confident, deadly. When it ended, I unplugged the drive and slipped it back into my pocket. I already sent copies to the bank, the police, and the tax board, I said. Consider this a courtesy showing. Mom stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. What happens now? She whispered. Whatever should have happened 5 years ago. Dean dropped into his chair, head in his hands. For the first time, he looked small. I sat back down. The turkey was cold, the candles almost gone. Dad poured himself a drink with shaking hands. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, he said, Carrie. Yes? I should have listened. I didn't say yes, you should have. I just nodded. Mom reached across the table as if to touch me, then stopped halfway, hands suspended in air. You came here to destroy him, she said quietly. I came here to stop pretending, I replied. You can rebuild the company, but you can't rebuild the lie. Dean lifted his head, eyes red. What about me? That's between you and the law, I said, and maybe your conscience if you ever meet it. He laughed, a raw sound. You think they'll forgive you for this? I'm not asking for forgiveness, I said. I'm asking for silence. From me. From you. From all of us. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped the floor like a scream. Outside, the rain had turned to snow. Through the window, the porch lights blurred in the white air. I took my coat from the rack. Dad started to speak, but I shook my head. No goodbyes, not this time. Mom whispered something, maybe my name, maybe a prayer. Dean didn't look up. I walked to the door and paused, hand on the handle. The air behind me felt heavy, thick with everything unsaid. I'm thankful, I said, not turning around, that truth doesn't need anyone's permission. Then I stepped outside. The cold hit like baptism, clean, sharp, final. I walked down the driveway, the snow gathering on my hair, my sleeves, my memory. Behind me, voices rose. First Mom's cry, then Dad's low rumble, then Dean shouting something I couldn't make out. A crash followed. A plate, maybe. Or a photograph hitting the floor. I didn't look back. At the end of the street, I stopped and took out my phone. I opened the camera, pressed record. The wind hissed against the microphone. They took my name, I said softly. My future. My voice. Tonight I took them back. I smiled. Not the triumphant kind, just tired. Happy Thanksgiving. I ended the recording, slipped the phone into my pocket, and kept walking. The snow thickened. Somewhere, distant fireworks from the next town colored the clouds gold and red. Celebration or chaos, impossible to tell. For me, it was just light. I didn't feel victorious, I felt balanced. And for the first time in 5 years, that was enough. They came for Dean at 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, when the neighborhood still smelled like wet grass and automatic sprinklers. 2 unmarked sedans idled at the curb. A third rolled up slow and quiet. I watched from across the street in my parked car, coffee gone cold in the cup holder. The porch light was on, though the sun had already cleared the roofs. Mom always left the light on for us, even after there was no us. The door opened. The house exhaled heat and lemon cleaner. Dean stepped out in a blazer thrown over a t-shirt, hair flattened wrong on one side, bare ankles shoved into loafers without socks. For a split second, I saw the boy he'd been. Sleepy, spoiled, certain the world would bend. Then the badge flashed. The handcuffs clicked. His chin lifted, trained for cameras that hadn't arrived yet. When they read him the charges, wire fraud, forgery, tax evasion, he winced the way people wince at a bright light. Mom burst onto the porch in her robe, pearls still in her ears like she'd slept with them for courage. She grabbed one agent's sleeve, "There has to be a mistake," and was guided gently aside. Dad stood behind her, one hand on the doorframe, as if holding the house upright were still his job. He didn't say a word. They put Dean in the back seat. He looked out through the glass, eyes scanning the quiet street for a lens to perform to. He saw me instead. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his mouth bent into something between a smile and a snarl, and he turned away. By noon, the cameras arrived. A news van parked half on the lawn, the reporter's hair unnaturally perfect against the wind. "Local real estate executive under investigation," the lower third announced, the kind of sentence that makes strangers shake their heads and set their forks down. Mom tried to close the blinds. Reporters asked how she felt. She said nothing. Dad put his arm around her in a way that was more apology than comfort. "I didn't go to the house, I didn't call. I let the process be the process. The drive in my desk drawer had already done its work. My emails to the bank and the state tax board had done theirs. Truth needs no rescue once it can walk on its own." A month later, arraignment. The courthouse wore its stone-like armor. It was one of those Midwestern buildings that pretends timelessness. A clock above the door, a flag in the cold that stiffened rather than waved. It had snowed overnight, the slick kind that hides under fresh powder. People shuffled up the steps looking at their phones instead of their feet. Inside, the air tasted like dust and old paper. I came alone. I didn't tell friends or ask for company. Revenge is communal in movies. In life, it's solitary. I found a seat in the last row and sat straight-backed, hands folded. When your voice has been called hysteria, posture is a weapon. Dean entered flanked by his attorney and a deputy. He'd shaved too close. The razor burn glowed like embarrassment along his jaw. His suit fit expensively, longer lines than as usual, a costume of contrition. He scanned the gallery cautiously, rehearsed surprise calibrated for the inevitable cameras. When his eyes found me, the performance flickered. He looked away first. Mom and Dad came in together. She had a tissue in her hand before she needed it. He touched her elbow. A pilot guiding a wing through turbulence. They sat 2 rows ahead of me and to the left, directly behind the prosecution table, facing the place where their son would stand. Mom didn't turn around. Dad did, just once, just enough to know I was there. The judge took the bench. Everyone rose, then sat. The clerk rattled off case numbers like a metronome. Lines of people moved forward, shuffled out, lives sorted into categories. Guilty, not guilty, continued, dismissed. When Dean's name was called, the room rebalanced, the way a theater rebalances when the lead steps on stage. The charges sounded almost simple in the clerk's voice. My name in that list sounded strange. A last name that matched theirs because facts don't change when families fracture. The prosecutor read from the summary with a patience I recognized from my own work. Dates, amounts, pathways of money through names that weren't real. She did not exaggerate. She did not need to. The judge asked for a plea. Dean's attorney stood, one hand light on Dean's arm. Not guilty, Your Honor. Dean nodded like a man who believed in his own headline. Bail argued, then set. Travel documents surrendered. Weekly check-ins, no contact with certain witnesses. My name sat in that list again. The judge's eyes flicked across the courtroom. I held my chin level and gave him nothing to read. We filed out, attorneys first, then the press, then the people who were there, because this is what you do when your life blows up. Sit quietly and wait to be told what happens next. In the corridor, cold air leaked from under the doors. Fluorescent lights hummed. Mom leaned her forehead against the marble wall for a second, then braced herself and kept moving. Dad's hand hovered over her shoulder, not touching but near. I stood still to let them pass. When they drew even, Dad hesitated. He looked older than the bricks. Carrie, he said. One word, neither apology nor accusation. A stake driven in neutral ground. Dad. My voice sounded almost normal. Mom's eyes flashed, a dozen emotions sprinting behind the blue. She opened her mouth. No words came. She swallowed, regrouped, soldiered on. Dean followed with his lawyer. For a brief second, traffic in the corridor stalled. Reporters clogging the exits, a bailiff raising his baritone to clear a path. Dean was 5 feet away from me, then 3. He stopped. Enjoy it? He said under his breath, eyes still half on the cameras. All this? He didn't gesture, he didn't need to. I took him in, suit, mask, the damp at his temples where nerves refused to be styled. I don't enjoy any of it, I said. I just stopped pretending. He tried to smile and found he couldn't. You think they'll forgive you? Dean's eyes flicked toward our parents. I'm not asking. I stepped closer so the press wouldn't catch the words. You were the favorite, Dean. You could have done good. You could have been enough. You chose this. His mouth made a shape I'd never seen on him before, something like grief distorted by pride. He lifted his chin. We'll see who chooses what, he said, but the lines in his forehead betrayed the fact that the choosing had already happened. His lawyer touched his sleeve, pulled him forward. He went, the way people go when momentum does the walking. After the arraignment came weeks of motions, status conferences, discovery. It was boring the way real accountability is boring, form after form, a machine grinding slowly but exactly. I kept working at the cafe in the mornings and doing small books gigs in the afternoons. Word had gotten around that I was good with messes. The irony didn't bother me. Work felt like scaffolding. Sometimes I'd catch myself outside the courthouse, looking up at the stone like it was a mountain I'd hiked by accident. The statue of blind justice stood in the cold and refused to shiver. I never trusted statues. They're too sure of themselves. But I stood near her anyway and read the dates carved around the entrance, a timeline of renovations and reconstructions that suggested even buildings can be revised without losing their meaning. One night, close to midnight, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't know. I recognized the voice. The bank manager, the one who used to hand out lollipops to kids on Saturdays. He cleared his throat as if preparing for church. Ms. Foster, he said, I owe you an apology. The words sounded new on his tongue. I should have listened sooner. He didn't say he was sorry for the forgery, for the loan, for the complicity. He said he should have listened. It was something. I saved the message because I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it. Trial dates penciled, then inked. Dean's attorney filed motions to suppress, to exclude, to postpone. Most were denied. A few were granted. The system did what it does. Narrowed possible futures into a single corridor you can either walk or fight. The morning of jury selection, snow came heavy and without negotiation. The plows moved like silent animals in the dark, shouldering up the gray. I wore boots and a black coat and a knit hat Mom had made years ago. It was the last thing from her I still allowed near my skin. In the elevator, prosecutors made small talk about coffee. Defense attorneys scrolled. Life happens even when lives are on fire. Inside voir dire, the French the law uses to make ordinary things sound precise. Prospective jurors shifted in their seats, clutching numbers. The questioners tried to find 12 people who could forget everything they thought they knew about stories like this. I watched faces. Boredom, annoyance, pity, a few flares of anger. No one looked at me like a villain. No one looked at me like a saint. Mostly they looked at Dean. He looked at them like contestants he needed to charm. He dressed as humbly as his closet would allow. No watch, no cufflinks, gray suit that dulled his glow. He kept his hands on the table and his head slightly tilted, an old salesman's trick that says, "I'm listening." On the second day during a break, I stepped into the hallway to breathe air that hadn't already been sworn in. Through the window, I watched the snow thicken into a living thing. In the glass, my reflection hovered over the white world. A woman with a hat too silly for a courtroom and eyes too clear for theater. Mom appeared beside me in the reflection. She stood close but not touching. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't hostile, it was raw. "I made a pie last night," she said. The sentence startled me into a quiet laugh. "Pumpkin? Of course." She managed the ghost of a smile. "The recipe you always liked, with extra spice." "I did always like that one," I said. She nodded, turning the edge of her tissue between forefinger and thumb, twisting it to a paper rope. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Be your mother and not be his defender." "You don't have to do both," I said. "You can be human." She exhaled and it fogged the glass. "Your father said last night he didn't want to be proud of anyone. He wanted to be decent." She paused. "It sounded like a plan." "It is," I said. She began to cry then, not the embarrassed sobs from dinner, but the animal ones that come when there's no one left to perform for. I didn't touch her. I stood beside her until the tide went out. When she straightened, she plucked a fresh tissue from her sleeve like a magician pulling white out of nowhere. "He was our golden child," she said softly. "I know." "He would have been fine," she insisted, a last flare of the faith that raised us. "He could have been good," I said. "He chose easy." She looked at me with a wounded sort of curiosity. "And you chose hard." "Yes." A bailiff cleared his throat at the far end of the corridor. "Back in 5, he announced to the air. We moved as if choreographed, two women who shared a house and a history, and a man and a silence. Before we turned, Mom reached into her bag and took out an envelope, creased, soft at the corners. I recognized it instantly. The checkered one with the stamp half peeled. She held it out. "I found this in my drawer," she said. "I should have said it to your face." I took the envelope and slid the letter out. The paper had thinned at the fold from too much opening. I didn't read it. I knew every word. You were always too honest for this family. I folded it once more, very small, and slid it back into its envelope. "Thank you," I said, "for letting it be true." She nodded. We went back inside. The plea didn't come until the morning openings were scheduled. His attorney asked for a moment before the jury entered. They went into a corner with the prosecutor. The judge waited. The jury waited. The room held its breath like a diver. When they returned to the table, Dean looked smaller. That's not a metaphor. He actually seemed to occupy less air. His hands were flat on the wood as if making a promise to gravity. "Your Honor," his attorney said, voice unsmoothed, "my client would like to change his plea." A murmur ran through the gallery like electricity looking for ground. The judge lifted a palm. "Order." "Guilty," Dean said. The word landed like something dropped from a great height. Simple, heavy, irreversible. The judge asked him if anyone had threatened him, promised him, coerced him. He said no. He asked him if he understood what he was giving up: the right to trial, to cross examination, to appeal. He said yes. He asked him what he'd done. Dean spoke softly as if the truth could be gentled by tone. He admitted to the transfers, to the shell accounts, to forging my name, to using Dad's signature. He didn't look at me when he said my name. He didn't look at our parents when he said our fathers. He didn't look at the jury at all. He looked at the floor, the way people do when they finally realize the shape of what they built. The judge accepted the plea and set a date for sentencing. The prosecutor moved to remand. The defense argued for an extension. The judge compromised the way judges do. Conditions tightened, travel revoked, reporting increased. The gavel felt like punctuation. We stood to leave. The jurors were released, confused and relieved to be excused from a story that no longer needed them. Mom sat and stared at her hands for a full minute. Dad said something to her I couldn't hear. Dean's attorney's shoulders dropped by an inch. The fight had moved to a new arena. In the corridor, the press waited, hungry and polite. Ms. Foster, did you expect this outcome? Ms. Foster, any comment for other families in similar situations? Ms. Foster, are you satisfied with justice? Their microphones made a bouquet of black foam. I didn't take any of them. No statement, I said. Calm. Even. The trick of not flinching is to stop seeing faces and start seeing objects. Light, plastic, wire. Outside, the snow came down in thick, obedient sheets. I stood under the courthouse eave and watched it fill the footprints we had made on the way in. Across the steps, Dean emerged between two deputies. There were no handcuffs this time, just nearness that felt like handcuffs without the metal. The cameras fired. He blinked, then posed, then remembered not to. Old habits scraped against new reality. Our eyes met one last time. The distance between us was only space. I didn't recognize him. That was a mercy I hadn't expected. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, maybe my name, maybe a curse, maybe a plea for me to look away first. I didn't. A gust sent snow into my face. I closed my eyes and opened them on purpose. He was being led down the steps when Dad and Mom stepped out. Mom made a small sound, then bit it back. Dad stood very straight. He did not wave. He did not call. He squared his shoulders like a man who finally understood that decency is work. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the soft envelope. I slid the letter out and unfolded it, not to read, but to hold proof that words can go from wish to law. The snow slicked the paper at the edges. Ink feathered slightly where the cold wanted to erase it. I tore the letter into neat strips. Not dramatic, just careful. Thin, even, deliberate. I held them in my fist for a moment. The way you hold confetti you're not sure you have the right to throw. Then I opened my hand. The pieces lifted, caught the wind, and mingled with the storm, white on white, lost on purpose. You were always too honest for this family, the letter had said. Maybe. Or maybe I finally found the right family for my honesty. Strangers in a room who listened because the evidence made them. A judge who asked the questions as if they mattered. A city that kept moving even when my life stopped and restarted in the same minute. I walked down the courthouse steps slowly, boots placing prints the snow would soon erase. At the curb, I stopped and filmed 10 seconds of sky, the kind of gray that makes the world look black and white. The audio caught only wind. They took my name, my future, my voice, I said, barely above a whisper. Today I took back the only thing that matters, the part of me that tells the truth even when no one claps. No fireworks, no music. Just gravity and weather and the sound a life makes when it settles into itself. At the crosswalk, I looked left, then right. The light changed, I crossed. Some endings announced themselves, this one didn't. It simply held. Behind me, the courthouse doors closed with the soft authority of a book finding its page. Ahead of me, the city streets steamed where snow met exhaust, ordinary and miraculous. I put the envelope, empty now, back into my pocket, not as a souvenir, but as a weight to keep me here. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel broken. I felt like a woman walking home in weather, warmed from the inside by something that finally had a name.